right, Kit, I'm going to ask you to state your name and your position at Cornell University, and then tell us a little bit about your background, education, work experience.
Okay, my name is Kit Umbach, and I am a senior lecturer in the Department of Materials Science and Engineering. I received my PhD here at Cornell in applied and engineering physics in 1991, and since then I've stayed in Ithaca at Cornell over the years with a variety of different positions. The activity that I've pursued related to the CCMR has been part of my appointment prior to this. So I was a facility manager with a senior research associate position in CCMR, half-time, and that allowed me to maintain and characterization equipment and also develop new techniques for that equipment. And at the same time, I had a faculty position where I was teaching and doing research.
So you sort of alluded to this, but what brought you to Cornell to attend?
Well, I was very attracted by the interdisciplinary
Let's try that again. What brought you to Cornell?
I was very attracted as a graduate student by the interdisciplinary functions of Cornell, that you could be in applied engineering physics, but work with someone in material science. And Cornell is wonderful with its field system that enables faculty to work in different areas, to attract graduate students with different expertise. And so I loved that aspect of Cornell. I was very interested actually in surface physics and surface chemistry when I came, and that led me into scanning probe characterization, which is one of the techniques that I was working on for CCMR when I was the facility manager. So Cornell has a very strong facilities infrastructure, and that's great for graduate students and for faculty, and it also is attractive to companies, I think.
Can you tell us, in easy to understand terms, a little bit about your research and what you do with the CCMR?
Okay, so the right now I'm primarily interested in teaching, but I do have a small research activity, and that is focused on the kinds of techniques that I was developing when I was a senior research associate in CCMR. So these would be typically surface characterization, materials characterization techniques. One of them also is Raman spectroscopy, and Raman spectroscopy is a technique that allows you to very easily probe the chemical composition of a material non-destructively, and that's one of the techniques that I've been involved with through the Jumpstart projects.
So you've been involved with the CCMR for a long time. How did you learn about the Industrial Partnerships Group?
I'm sorry, can you
say Industrial Partnerships Group?
Right.
The CCMR. I'm not kidding.
Right.
Yep.
As a facility manager, I was very aware of the CCMR Industrial Partnerships projects. What is it called? Program. Okay, let's start over again. Industrial Partnerships Program. Okay, so as a facility manager in CCMR, I was quite aware of the Industrial Partnerships Program because of the activities like Facilities 101, where we would learn about the needs of industry for facilities. I also would occasionally do, small analysis for companies that would come in with particular needs. But I think I became more aware of the details when there were a couple companies that approached me to do a jumpstart, and they were interested in being able to take advantage of the benefits of the jumpstart, which include lower rates for analysis and also expertise from faculty as well as the facility managers. And eventually I was able to get an interaction going where the Jumpstart was funded, and that was with Energy Materials Corporation out of Rochester. They were primarily interested in Raman spectroscopy characterization of materials that, that they were developing for photovoltaic applications.
Perfect. Just elaborate a little more on the particular types of expertise that you bring to a company.
So my more than a decade activity as a facility manager means that I am very familiar with certain techniques that are available in the CCMR. So these would include spectroscopic techniques as well as surface characterization. Because I also conduct research in that area, I'm thinking about the sort of the broader materials aspects of when these and how these techniques are applied. And so I think companies are going to find that expertise beneficial because not only do I understand the technique, but I have the bigger sort of scientific picture about when the technique's appropriate and how certain materials can be analyzed, finding a technique that works best for them.
So what are your personal motivations for working with an industrial company? And the examples are student experience, intellectual interest, learning new skills. Give us some idea of why you would like to work with a company.
Well, I think that when you're in an academic environment, you always like to think that your research skills and your knowledge can have some impact societally. And so, of course, we're always excited about discovering something new, but we also would like to think that our abilities are being used to benefit society. And companies are clearly developing technologies that have impact. And sometimes those technologies could have significant societal benefits. So the company Energy Materials Corporation is working on photovoltaics. So the jump start that I've had with them was, I think, aimed at developing a low-cost photovoltaic material. And that interaction now has blossomed, and we've made a proposal to a New York State authority, NYSERDA, to actually build on that research, and we're very optimistic that it will be funded, and that would be a great step, I think, for the company. So it's just exciting to work with companies that are pushing the envelope of technology, and because it stimulates my own curiosity about how to improve the technology. It pushes me to develop new techniques for analysis. And it also exposes students in some cases to interesting technologies that they can then, use in their academic kind of growth, progress.
So I know you've worked with a lot of companies. Can you give us a little idea on the difference between working with a large multinational corporation and a startup like Energy Materials?
Well, I think the primary difference that I find is that the smaller companies would like to benefit as much as possible from the knowledge set of their collaborators. I mean, they usually don't have sort of the resources to understand their problem and from a whole variety of perspectives. So if you're working with a company like Corning, then they will usually have a very narrow, focus on something, and you may not actually learn very much about their technology because of their particular, narrow focus. When often they're less eager to kind of share information with you, and that's not necessarily a bad thing for them, but maybe not as much sort of stimulation for the faculty. When you work with a startup, they often are trying to figure out all sorts of problems at once, and sometimes those problems become part of the discussion, and you can learn a lot, and it's sort of more stimulating. Of course, the challenge with smaller companies too is that they may, because they don't have as many resources, they may expect a lot from the facilities, and sometimes we can't provide everything, and so that I think, so managing that expectation is important too.
What were the steps that you went through to bring it into a funded project and to completion?
Well, usually those companies, when they're coming to Cornell, they're working through some unit or center to find a good match for what they need. And in the case of energy materials, it was the Industrial Partnerships Program. And they offered, I think, eventually they realized that the Jumpstart program would be appropriate for energy materials, which gives the company access to facilities at a lower rate than they would normally pay as an industrial user, and also gives them access to faculty time to guide that project. And so the energy materials found its way to CCMR, and there were discussions about what was possible to do, what would where would energy materials find the expertise that it needed. And I think it became clear pretty quickly that what they wanted was characterization assistance to understand the morphology and composition of their materials, because they've been doing electronic measurements and sort of practical measurements, but they really didn't understand what was going on sort of at the microscopic level, and we could offer that. So that I think that once they came here and saw what was available, that it was not a very long time before it became clear what could be done. So I think that was the steps there were not actually that complicated, right? I think I give credit to the CCMR for making that relationship go forward pretty quickly.
Beautiful. We didn't interrupt that at all, did we? Good job, kid.
Kit, what would you say is the value of Cornell compared to, we are not the only ones with facilities. I mean, is there anything really you want to point to in terms of value of the CCMR facilities compared to other institutions? Without giving, I guess, we cannot say, no, we are better than Binghamton.
Well, having been a facility manager, I think that the managers are very proud of their commitment to focusing on serving users. I think that this is a tradition in the CCMR, that we are. Our mission is to develop and maintain cutting-edge characterization and processing equipment, and that is a long tradition. And so the quality of people who are involved is very high, because many of them have been here for decades, and that enables them to have acquired quite a level of expertise. So I think the quality and the experience of the staff is very important, but also the scope of equipment. So there's a large range of equipment. That means that once you're working in CCMR, you're going to be exposed to people who understand the different ways to characterize materials. So there'll be electron microscopy, there'll be spectroscopic characterization. So you're working in an environment where it's not just one instrument that you're getting access to. You're really getting access to that instrument and then all the other background that may enable you to find another instrument that could do the job. And so I think that the scale is large enough that it enables a really dynamic process of finding the right kind of tool and having expert people to run it.
Can you give us an example of just one of how your expertise has impacted a business? I know you can't.
Do you want me to? Okay, so do you want to answer? Are we supposed to have a continuous question here, or so? Or
Yeah,
okay, why don't we just do it again? Start again.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't say anything you're not supposed to say. Just give us a nice, concise example of how your expertise has impacted a business.
Well, I've been involved with 2 jump starts now, and in both cases, the companies needed expertise in spectroscopic characterization, and they were not able to find that anywhere else. And so they needed to come to a place that had a spectroscopic tool to analyze the composition of material, and they needed someone who could operate that tool in a way that was appropriate for their material. And so I think the experience that I had in making measurements with the Raman spectroscopic system was such that I could adjust the measurements to what exactly was needed. Now, in the case of Energy Materials Corp., we realized after doing these measurements that their processing was not producing the kinds of material morphology that they really expected. And so in that sense, it sent them back to the drawing board. Now, that was, I think, a help, because now they're coming back and they have other ideas about how to pursue that. So we really did assist them, even though it was kind of a negative result. In the case of Ionica Sciences, which is also using the Raman instrument, they needed, again, somebody who could understand how to do large area, fast throughput measurements on their samples, and we had that expertise.
Just want to talk briefly about confidential information and how that's handled at a university. The previous folks mentioned non-disclosure agreements. So how do you feel, and how do you work with a company that has confidential ideas at a university like this?
Well, I think that the Jumpstart program is limited enough in scope that I'm not concerned about my intellectual sort of contribution being one that raises any issues for the company. Essentially, in the Jumpstart, what I've been doing is assisting them in characterizing and interpreting data. And so we're not really adding to their intellectual property by new ideas of how to develop the technology. We really are simply refining measurements. And so in that sense, the fact that there's a non-disclosure agreement that the university has already negotiated that applies to that company is perfectly suitable, and I've never felt any kind of anxiety about that interaction. So in that case, for the Jumpstart, it's been very straightforward.
So what would you tell a colleague that came to you that if they had concerns about working with a company as far as intellectual property or non-disclosure agreements?
Well, what I'd say to them is that if they are going to work through CCMR, through the Jumpstart, or the Industrial Partners Program, then they would find that path very straightforward. There's not really any, I think, obstacle to those kinds of interactions. There can, I think, when the company is looking for a particular kind of assistance where they may be benefiting from the intellectual contribution of the faculty member, then the faculty member should be careful about what kind of relationship they enter into.
Good. So just two more questions, and one is, what would you tell your colleagues about just in general working with private industry? If a young faculty member came to you and said, "Should I do this?"
My experience has been very positive. I think partly because CCMR has acted as a kind of a gatekeeper to make sure that the path is sort of smoothed to go forward, and that means not just the intellectual property aspect, but the funding aspect of it. I mean, there really is not that much that I have to negotiate myself. It really is taken care of by the pre-existing sort of framework of the Jumpstart or other aspects of the program. So I'd say in that case it's very straightforward, and you can count on getting good support from the CCMR. But certainly, I mean, if an individual faculty member is approached by a company, then they don't want to work within sort of an existing framework, then they need to be alert to sort of the pitfalls of that interaction.
And the flip side of that if you were talking to your friends who own a company of some technology company, what would you tell them about working with the university?
Well, what I'd say to them is that it depends on what they want to do and what their needs are. I think some interactions are very straightforward, that they can, if they simply want to do a particular kind of measurement, or they want to, there's an existing process that's available at Cornell that they want to make use of to improve their product or to test a process. I think that that's usually quite straightforward, and I'd recommend that. But I think companies sometimes maybe have unrealistic expectations about what the university interaction is like. And it also, faculty probably have unrealistic expectations of what companies, are doing. So there has to be a kind of mutual understanding. And that's the best place to start. If there's a real frank discussion about what's possible, and the faculty are honest about what they can do, and the company is straightforward about what they expect, then I think that shouldn't cause any difficulties.
Beautiful. I've reached the end of my questions. Do you want him to say anything else?
Just can you say a few words about publications? Are publications an issue? Or you probably have,
Peer reviews from industrial work. Ken said it, sometimes we want it because it justifies to our investors that this is
Right.
legitimate.
Do you want to ask the question again and I respond in a continuous
Yep.
fashion here? Okay.
So can you tell us about publishing data working with an industry?
So in my experience, there hasn't ever been any kind of expectation of publication from a company. I could understand that perhaps companies might benefit from that if they wanted an indication of the level of their accomplishment in their technology. In my situation, there has been no expectation. In some cases, I have published or made public results from interactions with companies, but that has been something that I've cleared before, and they've had no problem with.
Did we talk about the value for the students?
Do you want to talk about value for students in working with a company?
Can you ask the question again?
Sure.
We did.
Can you tell us a little bit about the value for students working on an industrial project?
I think that varies. It depends on what you're asking the students to do. In some cases, the students are really just executing tasks that you set them, and they may not really differentiate between whether it's a task that's set by the company or by just your own particular research needs. I think in the case of graduate students, where they have an opportunity to sit down with the company representatives and talk about measurements, they could really benefit by understanding how companies function, right? And so they'll see an example of industrial research. That, I think, is a benefit to a grad student. So it depends on the level of expectation of the company, what kind of measurements they want, what kind of flexibility they want to give the individuals who are working on the project.
Beautiful. Mike Brazil said something very similar. So.
Okay.
Good.